In the world of wrestling, collectibles and merchandise rule the world. Wrestling fans will generally spend exorbitant amounts of money on all different kinds of wrestling merchandise and memorabilia. But myself, as well as many of you watching this channel, have consistently asked the question, why are more people not collecting wrestling cards? Why are they not looking at wrestling cards in the same light as some of these other types of collectibles that people are spending big money for? Well, stick around because on today's video, we're going to be doing some comparisons between wrestling cards and other types of wrestling memorabilia. And we'll finally settle that debate. Which wrestling collectible is better?
All right, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. Wrestling merchandise in general can mean different things to different people. So I thought it would be fun to do an exercise comparing different types of things. And most of them I wanted to compare a wrestling card of different varieties to a different type of wrestling collectible. And as we go through these, let me know in the comments below which one of these you'd rather have and why. I also tried to pick items that I thought would appeal to a broad audience, and I tried to pick items that had either sold for or were listed at buy it nows in comparison to each other. So let's jump in and talk about some great wrestling stuff. Vintage wrestling memorabilia lot, $69.99 with a best offer of $59.99 versus 2022 Immaculate Core Jade Auto Relic out of 99, listed at 80, best offer of 60. Here we have the classic battle of old versus new, modern versus vintage. So we have this vintage lot, and it's got some old photos, some magazines, some programs, and autographs within it. And in the other corner, we have a modern release product of an up-and-coming talent that checks all the boxes. Rookie card, autograph, relic, premium product. So which one of these is better? From a demand perspective, not sure. Because I feel like the vintage stuff is going to appeal to an older audience or a more niche collector. As I've stated before, I don't see a lot of newer collectors going back and digging through stuff like this, although I do wish they would. I think that's unfortunate. I think more modern wrestling fans need to understand wrestling history, but it just is what it is. People are people, and they do what they want. On the flip side, I feel like that Cora Jade card has more appeal to younger fans and maybe older wrestling historians. They don't know who she is. They don't care. From a value perspective, I really think these two are even, as I think they're both kind of boom or bust. I really don't think the demand is going to be there for the vintage stuff overall, but I could see a scenario where somebody who knows what they're looking for could buy that lot and then find a piece or two out of there that are very valuable, sell the rest of it, or maybe it's just underpriced in general because they know that older stuff. And as we know, it only takes one person to open that wallet, pony up to get that one piece they need for their collection. And maybe that's buried somewhere in this lot, and the person who's interested in it was an eagle eye and spotted it. But Cora Jade is also a boom or bust. People have already been prospecting on her pretty heavily, and if she becomes the next big thing in the WWE, we could see this card skyrocket. But on the flip side, Panini has put out so many rookie cards and so many sets of this talent. And we don't quite know if Cora Jade does become, in fact, the big star that many people says she's going to be. Is this going to be the rookie card to chase? Or maybe she has a rookie card in another set that becomes the card, therefore devaluing this one down the road. We just don't know. And then there's always that risk that if you're prospecting on her, she's just a flash in the pan. She doesn't end up at that upper echelon of a Charlotte, of a Becky Lynch, of a Bianca Belair, of an Asuka. And at that point, unless you're a super collector or a set collector, this card might as well be a drink coaster. 1992 WCW Beach Blast sealed VHS, $104.50 versus 1993 Coliseum home video promo lot, $85 or best offer with $20.33 shipping. So here's an interesting dynamic. We have two wrestling video products squaring off against each other. In my opinion, this sort of thing really took off during the hobby boom, where people were really looking for hidden value and different things to collect. Now, wrestling videos and VHS have been a staple for collectors for years. You can go all the way back to the tape trading days. In fact, I think some people still do trade tapes. But back then, a person's VHS collection and library of wrestling history was huge. For many people, that was their prized possession. That was their 82 All-Star set, was their video library that they had traded for. But fast forward to 2023, and we have to ask ourselves, do people want either of these products? From a demand perspective, I've got to side with the promo lot. I think that sealed VHS or graded VHS is still a little bit of a foreign concept to some people. Why would you want a sealed copy of a VHS tape? Something that's sealed that you're supposed to be watching? playing on your VCR. Meanwhile, I think this Coliseum home video promo lot is going to appeal to a ton of people. I feel like more people are going to have that nostalgic connection with Coliseum home videos in general, and I think a lot of that goes back to history, nostalgia, throwing back to all of those mom and pop video stores that most of us had around us. You could almost guarantee that they had some sort of WWF Coliseum home video for you to go in and rent. You could get that. You could get WWF Royal Rumble for the Super Nintendo on the same night. Get some Mountain Dew, and you're good for the weekend. And for a lot of us, that's how we were exposed early on to some of the older stuff that was in the WWF at the time. Some of the greatest characters and matches and rivalries that we've ever seen. From a value perspective, I've got to go with the VHS. I feel like there's a lot more of the Coliseum home video promos and cards and all that stuff. There's a lot more of that stuff floating around, I feel like, than these sealed VHSs. Especially the early 90s WCW stuff. I feel like you just don't see a lot of those official VHS releases. You don't see them floating around very much. And as I said, it only takes one person. The one person that needs this 1992 Beach Blast VHS tape to add to their library, their collection. That one person to pay up big time. WCW NWO Revenge for the Nintendo 64 graded 9.2 by Wada. $721 with $12.45 shipping versus Logan Paul signed custom Pokemon card, $699.99. Pop culture clash. I think that video games are more popular and acceptable right now from the general public than they ever have been. On the flip side, I think you could say the exact same thing about Pokemon and Logan Paul. All three of these categories that I mentioned, video games, Pokemon, and we'll put Logan Paul in the social media influencer category. All three categories, huge mass appeal. So with that being said, what do I think would have more demand? If we're looking at the WCW NWO Revenge, I think that there are even a lot of non-wrestling fans out there that would say that this is one of the better wrestling games ever made. And while we have another similar product to what we talked about with the VHS, here we have a form of media that's sealed, that's graded. It's supposed to be out of the box, in the console, play it on your TV. I just feel like gamers kind of get the whole graded and sealed game thing a little bit more than some of the VHS stuff. Within gaming, I've often heard people talk about, yeah, I want that sealed copy of this. I want the graded copy of this. I've got to have that to add to my collection. I want it on my shelf as a display piece. And the reason being is because they don't care as much about actually playing that because they can find different ways to play that game now, be it virtual consoles, downloading on PC, downloading on mobile, emulation, and much more. So they can then look at that physical media as a collectible, but still enjoy the game in a different aspect. But on the other side, we have a combination of custom Pokemon with Logan Paul signed and graded by PSA Home Run. I would think the demand for this would be sky high. I could see the appeal from Pokemon collectors. I could see the appeal from wrestling fans. I could see the appeal from just people who dig Logan Paul. From a value perspective, gotta go with the video game. Even though there were thousands of this game produced, finding a sealed copy or a graded copy on top of that, it's going to be pretty tough to do, especially if you don't want to throw down $700. Not to mention the price of retro games just in general, whether it's just the cartridge or complete in box, sealed or sealed and graded. All of those things, the prices have just gone through the roof the past few years. Now, on the flip side, I did state that I thought there would be a lot of demand for this Logan Paul Pokemon card, in which case that would probably raise the value. So if you're looking at this Logan Paul card from a card perspective, again, let's say you're a Pokemon collector and you want this because it's a custom and there's not a lot of them out there. Maybe you're a wrestling fan and there's not really Logan Paul wrestling cards out there yet. So maybe you look at this card and you're like, yeah, I got to add that to my collection. I'm going to pay whatever it takes. Could totally see that because there's just not a lot of these out there. But outside of those specific categories, there's other Logan Paul signed stuff out there that's much cheaper. Plenty of Logan Paul cut autos, signed 8x10, signed photos, signed Pokemon cards, and other things out there. WWF Classic Superstars Undertaker figure, Toy Fair exclusive, out of 100, $1,500 versus 1991 Merlin Undertaker PSA 8 autographed, $1,499.99 with $4.99 shipping. Deadman Inc. merch. Here's a classic hobby showdown. Wrestling figures versus wrestling cards. This is something that many of us within the wrestling card collecting community have talked about ad nauseum. From a demand perspective, I've got no doubt in my mind that it's the figure on this. Wrestling fans love wrestling figures. In fact, I would go as far as to say that wrestling figures are potentially the most collected item out of all wrestling memorabilia. Add into this one specifically that it's out of 100 a Toy Fair exclusive. Oh, and not to mention, it's from the Classic Superstars line, which I think is one of the most collected wrestling series out there. And while many of us within wrestling cards are deep in the weeds and we know Merlin, the 91 Merlin set, we know what's in it, I think people would probably look elsewhere if they're looking for an Undertaker card. From a value perspective, still got to go with the wrestling figure. I just feel like the demand is always going to be there for this wrestling figure specifically, as opposed to there's a ton of Merlin cards out there. And at this point, with Panini and Undertaker doing private signings, we've got tons of Undertaker autos out there. But even if wrestling cards get to that upper echelon level and they are then viewed as a high level collectible similar to wrestling figures or potentially bigger, I still feel like people would look at other Undertaker cards as the cards they want, not so much this one, but would still look at this wrestling figure as that one Undertaker figure that they've got to add. Ring used Bailey gear, $25,300 versus 2022 Immaculate Platinum 1 of 1 Hulk Hogan Iron Sheik dual auto and a 2021 Transcendent Alexa Bliss 1 of 1 Superfractor auto, $23,000 for both. The main event of wrestling card comparison. No matter which way you slice it or what side you take, these collectibles in this portion of the video are upper echelon, top of the mountain collectibles. So which one would have more demand? I think that's tough. And to just take my card biases out of it, it's kind of hard to pick a side. I feel like wrestling fans and collectors know the value and the worth of ring used gear. But on the flip side, I think wrestling fans also understand and appreciate autographs and one-of-a-kind items, which all three of these items are one of a kind. And after saying all that, I may lean slightly, very, very slightly from, again, taking my card biases out of it, to the ring-worn gear. Only because I think it might be easier for a general collector coming in to understand what they're buying. You have gear, it's photo matched, and it was worn by Bailey in an event. That's pretty self-explanatory, as opposed to trying to explain these cards. Sure, they look cool, they got cool images, they got autographs, cool designs, but I think when you try to explain why Transcendent's important, why a Superfractor is important, what is a Superfractor in general? What's Immaculate Platinum 1 of 1? What does that even mean? Again, just comparing the two collectibles, if you're pulling a collector off the street, I think it's going to be a little bit harder for them to understand why you would pay $20K plus for two of these cards when you could pay $20K plus for some WWE ring-worn gear. But from a value perspective, I'm with the cards all the way. These two cards specifically are truly one-of-ones. And again, you could say the same thing about the Bailey ring-worn gear. It's a one-of-a-kind item, and it only maybe was used at a specific event, therefore kind of being a one-of-one as well. But if you look around, there's also been Bailey ring-worn gear sold at different levels, different types of gear, and there could be more in the future. But you can't say that about these cards, especially with that Hogan and Sheik dual auto. Sheik's not signing anymore. Not to mention you're getting two one-of-ones instead of one thing that could be considered a one-of-one. So from a value perspective, you're doubling your chances with the cards of those going up in value as opposed to the gear. Not to mention, as we've talked about many times before, cards, much easier to store, much easier to ship if you sell it, much easier to just grab and go if you have an emergency in your house. So after running through all of these awesome wrestling collectibles in today's video, have we come to the conclusion? Which wrestling collectible is better? And the answer, I don't think there is one. It just all depends on the collector. While we can all talk about and compare and contrast different types of wrestling collectibles, it really boils down to what people want. And on the flip side, what they're willing to pay. And while myself and many of you out there watching this video right now, maybe we are all talking about how we want wrestling cards to go up in value and the collector base in general just growing to further cement wrestling cards as legit collectibles, it is still probably one of the lowest tier collectibles within wrestling. But that's not to say we can't collect a little bit of everything. I mean, look behind me at everything I've got for my collection. It's just fun stuff to have. They're fun items to have that connection with, that nostalgia, and just tie in your fandom about why you are a fan of something in the first place. But with this video and all of the other videos on this channel in the archives, as well as all the other great wrestling card content that's out there, we're just doing our part to help educate and bring to light how great wrestling cards are. They're cool, they're fun, they can have some value. If you enjoyed today's video and it brought you some value, hit that subscribe button, give me a like, and let me know what is your favorite wrestling collectible, whether it's a card or a figure or a VHS. What's your number one item in your collection? I'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions, and stories. Again, leave that below. And when you're done doing that, make sure to check out all of the links below in the show notes for the ways you can help show your support for this channel. Links to Wrestling with Cards on Patreon, links to my eBay store, links to my social media accounts, the Wrestling with Card podcast, and much more. But if there's one takeaway that I want you to have from watching this video today, it's that while many will say wrestling cards will never get to the same level as figures, wrestling cards will never be taken seriously as collectibles, can we at least, please, get wrestling cards to the same level of those replica belts that are made of tin that all these wannabe wrestlers walk around at live events and at their mall with? Hate those things. Click the videos on the screen for more great wrestling card content in the archives of this channel. I'll see you there.